Are you really asking a quiet man for clearance? Linda scoffed, her pen tapping like a flag rope click against the post office glass. Neighbors murmured as they pressed him with rules he never argued yet. Ellery just stood there, steady as the porch light that framed his worn service coin. Then the room shifted. Even the silence thumped once like a heartbeat when a retired general stepped in and caught sight of that familiar coin glint. Still quiet men leave echoes too. Let me take you back. The bell over the post office door gave a small, tired ring as Ellery Brooks stepped inside. Morning light pooled across the old linoleum, soft and gold in that Veterans Day weekend way. Quiet, respectful, the whole town, not quite awake yet. Ellery moved with the same steady rhythm he always carried, shoulders relaxed, breath calm, hands sure even after 60 years of life and more miles than most folks imagined. He set his letters on the counter, adjusted the corner of a flag display someone had nudged crooked, and reached into his pocket for the small bundle of mail he needed to sort. The post office always felt like neutral ground, just the hum of lights, the smell of paper, and a long row of brass mailboxes. A place that didn't ask much of him. The door chimed again. Linda Weaver walked in with a clipboard pressed to her chest, glasses hanging low on her nose. Her heels tapped across the floor with purpose, the kind of sound that made people straighten their backs without knowing why. "Morning, Mr. Brust. Coubois?" She said, her voice thin but sharp. Ellery nodded gently. "Morning, ma'am." Linda didn't return the smile. Her gaze slid past him toward the windows, where the post office's bulletin board reflected a sliver of the street outside. Her eyes narrowed. "I passed your place earlier," she said. "That wooden plaque hanging under your porch light?" "I don't recall approving that." Ellery paused a single envelope halfway into his sorting pile. "Didn't think it needed much approving," he replied softly. Linda inhaled like someone preparing for a recital. "Mr. Brooks, do you have any authorization to place that plaque? Who cleared it?" "You know. HOA guidelines require visible items to be registered with the board." Ellery offered her a patient, nearly apologetic smile. "It's just a keepsake, ma'am." But Linda looked at him the way people do when they think someone's missed a memo everyone else received. Her pen tapped the clipboard, rapid and irritated. Before the moment stretched too thin, the door chimed again. A gust of cold air rushed in, followed by a boy of maybe 12, backpack half-zipped, cheeks pink from the chill. "Hey, Mr. Brooks?" Evan puffed out, jogging to the counter. "Sorry, I'm just dropping this. Dad said he'll be able to check mail from base this weekend." "Take your time," Ellery said, nudging the bin toward him. As Evan leaned forward, his eyes caught the faint glint of metal in Ellery's wallet, the edge of a coin worn smooth around the rim. The boy looked up immediately. "Is that a service coin?" "My dad's got one too, well. Not the same, but can I see it?" Ellery's hand closed over the wallet a heartbeat faster than usual. "Another time, son," he murmured. "Nothing much to look at." "Oh," Evan said, deflating just a little. "Okay." Linda watched the exchange with a thin smirk, as if even the coin somehow required paperwork. She scribbled something on her clipboard, lips pressed together. Ellery slid the stack of sorted envelopes to the side and gave Evan a gentle nod. The boy brightened, dropped his letter into the outgoing tray, and hurried for the door again. The bell chimed once more, then fell silent. Linda left without another word, heels clicking all the way down the steps. Ellery exhaled slowly, steadying the envelopes with one hand. Outside, the wind picked up a scatter of leaves and carried them down Maple Street. Still, the town wasn't done testing him. The Maple Ridge Cafe hummed the way it always did on late fall mornings. Coffee pots sputtering silverware, clinking conversations, drifting like steam above the tables. It was warm inside, soft yellow warm, the kind that made people linger longer than their schedules allowed. Linda Weaver stood near the pastry case, her clipboard tucked against her side like it was part of her wardrobe. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, still wearing light jackets, hands cupped around mugs, waiting for the day to settle. "I'm telling you," Linda said, lowering her voice, but making sure it carried, "He doesn't have any right to hang that plaque on his porch. Not without clearance from the board." A man near the counter frowned thoughtfully. Maybe he forgot. Brooks is, what, almost 70, closer to 60, someone corrected. "Still old enough to forget forms," Linda replied, tapping her pen. "Rules exist for a reason. And he didn't file anything. Not a request, not a note. Nothing." The group murmured, some in agreement, some because murmuring was easier than disagreeing. "Probably just slipped his mind," a gray-haired woman said, though she didn't sound convinced. "He keeps to himself." "That's the issue," Linda insisted. "When you don't follow processes, it causes trouble. It looks sloppy." She straightened her blouse and lifted her chin as if the town were leaning on her shoulders. Across the room, Evan sat in a corner booth with a hot chocolate cooling between his palms. He'd stopped here after dropping the letter at the post office, expecting the friendly noise he liked. Instead, he heard his neighbor's name repeated with a tone he didn't like at all. "Mr. Brooks didn't hurt anybody," Evan muttered under his breath. The adults didn't hear him, or didn't care to. He sank lower in the booth, chewing his lip. He remembered the quiet way Ellery Brooks folded his hands, the soft smile he gave without showing teeth. Someone who carried himself like noise didn't belong to him. Then the door opened, and the cafe seemed to inhale all at once. Ellery Brooks stepped inside, brushing a few leaves off his coat. He gave the room a polite nod. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of greeting someone gives when they don't want to disturb whatever rhythm already exists. Conversation stuttered, then thinned, like someone had turned the volume knob down a little too far. Ellery made his way to the counter slowly, one hand steadying himself against a chair as he passed. The man from earlier leaned toward his friend and whispered, barely hiding the gesture, "He shouldn't have hung that thing. Not without HOA permission." "Yeah," the friend murmured back. "It's not by the book." Evan felt a small flame of frustration flicker in his chest. He stared at the two men, then back at Brooks, who didn't seem to notice or chose not to. The barista forced a polite smile as Ellery reached the counter. "Morning, Mr. Brooks." "The usual." "If it's not too much trouble," he said gently. He sat at a small table near the window, hands resting around a warm mug when it arrived. Evan watched him from across the room. The boy had only glimpsed the plaque once, just a shape under the porch lamp, old wood, with soft edges nearly swallowed by shadow. Something handmade. Something kept alive long after its purpose changed. He wondered why it mattered so much to Linda, or why the cafe fell quiet just because one quiet man walked in. Outside, a breeze nudged the cafe's sign, making it creak against its chain. Leaves blew past the windows in copper spirals. A knock rattled the cafe doorframe as the mail carrier pushed it open. She scanned the room, spotted Ellery, and walked over with a stiff envelope in hand. "Delivery for you, Mr. Brooks." He accepted it with a soft nod, thumb brushing the corner of the envelope. Evan saw the return address. Then the letter from the HOA arrived. A thin mist of rain drifted across Maple Ridge, by dusk turning the streetlights into soft halos. Ellery Brooks stepped off the curb with a canvas mailbag slung over his shoulder, the kind carriers used years ago but somehow looked natural on him. He wasn't on the clock, not officially. But on evenings like this, when the weather leaned toward lonely, he walked the quieter streets, delivering letters to the older folks who didn't get out much anymore. He paused at Mrs. Halpern's porch, lifted the lid of her rusted mailbox, and slipped a small stack of envelopes inside. He made sure the flap closed all the way before moving on. Rain gathered along the brim of his cap, sliding down in steady drops. He didn't seem bothered. It was a rhythm he knew. A voice called from behind him. "Mr. Brooks, wait up." Evan jogged down the sidewalk, hoodie pulled tight around his head. His sneakers splashed in the shallow puddles, and he stopped beside Ellery, breath fogging in the cold. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Evan said. "My mom says the sidewalks get slick." Ellery offered a gentle smile. "Appreciate the concern. But I've walked these streets longer than most folks have lived on them." "Yeah, but..." Evan shifted his weight. "You're delivering mail, at night, in the rain." "Saves them a trip in the morning," Ellery replied, adjusting the mailbag. "Some of the older neighbors don't like cold steps. They walked together under the dim streetlights, past houses with quiet porches and curtains drawn for the night. The rain kept its soft, steady whisper. After a few minutes, Evan cleared his throat. "Why don't you tell people you do this? They'd stop talking about you the way they did today." Ellery slowed. The boy's earnestness reminded him of another voice years younger, soft like this, always curious. He let the memory settle before speaking. "Kindness doesn't need an audience," he said. "It doesn't need proof either. It just needs doing." Evan looked down at his shoes, kicking at a loose stone. "I still think people should know." "Maybe someday," Ellery murmured. They reached the corner of Willow Street, where Evan's house stood, with its porch light glowing warm against the rain. The boy hesitated, then gave Ellery a small wave before darting up the steps and inside. Ellery continued alone, finishing his small route with the same quiet pace. By the time he reached his own street, the rain had thinned to a hush. Porch lights blinked on as timers clicked into their evening schedules. His house sat at the bend, white siding, dark shutters, a porch that had seen years of sunsets and seasons. He climbed the steps slowly. Something felt slightly off, the way the shadows leaned or the air shifted. Then he saw it, the wooden plaque on his wall, captured in a flash of light from across the street. A silhouette moved away quickly. Linda holding her phone, its screen glow briefly reflecting against her glasses before she disappeared into the dark. Ellery stopped under the porch lamp. The plaque hung still, its old carved edges softened by time. He lifted his hand and traced the worn wood with 2 fingers, feeling the grooves, the way he once traced his wife's handwriting on the back. Rain gathered at the edge of the roof and fell in a slow drip. He stood there a long moment, but judgment was coming sooner than he knew. The HOA meeting hall buzzed with the restless energy of folding chairs, nervous coughs, and the low scrape of boots on the old wooden floor. It was the kind of room that carried every sound farther than it should, the kind where even whispers felt amplified. Maple Ridge didn't often fill the hall, but tonight, every seat was taken. Ellery Brooks stepped inside quietly, almost unnoticed at first. He held his cap in one hand, shoulders drawn in slightly, as if trying not to disturb the space around him. A few people glanced up, then quickly looked away. The plaque photo on the bulletin board behind the podium seemed to glow under the bright lights. Linda Weaver stood at the front clipboard in hand expression tight and triumphant. When she saw Brooks enter, she gave a small nod to herself and tapped her pen sharply on the podium. "Let's begin," she announced. "We have a violation to address." Murmurs fluttered around the room. Ellery took a seat near the back, setting his cap gently on his knee. Linda lifted a printed photo, the same one she had taken in the rain. Mr. Brooks placed this plaque on his porch without any authorization. None. This is a direct violation of HOA regulations. A few heads bobbed in agreement. Someone whispered, "Seems pretty clear." Another added, "He should have asked first." Ellery folded his hands together, breathing slow. Each word felt heavier than the last. Brooks felt slammed by the process, pressed by the attention of every eye in the hall, even though no one laid a hand on him. "That plaque," Linda continued, "is unapproved decor. It must be removed immediately." Her voice sharpened. "And we need to determine if fines are appropriate." Before she could continue, the back door creaked open. A hush rippled across the room. The town elder stepped inside. Thomas Hale, retired Army general. His hair had thinned over the years, but his posture still carried the weight of service. He walked with a slow, deliberate grace, one hand steadying himself along the row of chairs as he moved toward the front. "General Hale," someone whispered. "What's he doing here?" Linda blinked rapidly. General, this is a HOA meeting. If you'll just find a seat." He didn't. Instead, he stepped right up beside Linda at the podium. His gaze fell on the photo of the plaque, and something in his face shifted, softening first, then sharpening with recognition. He turned slowly toward Ellery, then with the entire hall watching General Hale brought his heels together. His back straightened, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted with the calm authority of a man who had spent a lifetime commanding respect. He stood at attention. "For Ellery Brooks." "Mr. Brooks, the general," said, voice resonant and steady, "sir." A breath caught in the room, one collective inhale. Linda's face drained of color. Her clipboard trembled in her hands. She clutched the stack of papers so tightly the top sheet bent in half. Realization washed over her, cold, quick, unmistakable. "Why are you?" she stammered. But her voice barely escaped her throat. General Hale didn't look at her. His eyes remained locked on Ellery, full of a reverence the crowd could not understand. "This man," Hale continued, "kept your town safe long before any of you knew there was danger." He nodded toward the plaque. His wife carved that by hand. After he repaired the old flood warning system in '06, the one that saved the south end of town. The murmurs turned stunned, hushed. No one had known. No one had asked. Ellery stared at the floor, overwhelmed, but silent. General Hale lowered his stance at last, stepping forward to place a gentle hand on Ellery's shoulder. "You earned that plaque," he said quietly. "And far more." Linda stepped back from the podium as though the floor itself had shifted under her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The certainty she clung to just minutes ago crumbled completely. A silence settled over the room, deep, ringing, undeniable. Yet the silence itself felt like a verdict. The crowd drifted out of the HOA hall in slow, uncertain lines, as if no one quite trusted their own footsteps yet. What had happened still hung in the air, the sight of a retired general standing at attention for a quiet man most of them had overlooked. Outside, the streetlights cast long beams across the sidewalk, and the cool night held its breath. Ellery Brooks stepped down the hall stairs carefully, one hand on the railing. He didn't seem angry or proud or shaken, just steady the way he always was. But people were different now as they approached him, softened at the edges, unsure of how to begin. Mr. Brooks," a woman said, voice trembling. I'm sorry. Truly." "We didn't know." A man beside her nodded, rubbing the back of his neck, should have asked before judging. Guess we all did. Ellery offered a small nod. No harm done, but the man shook his head. There was harm. Just because it wasn't loud doesn't mean it wasn't there. Others gathered around neighbors Ellery had known for years, but never expected apologies from. Their words came hesitantly, each one carrying the weight of misunderstanding. We shouldn't have gone along with Linda. We should have seen the kind of man you are. We didn't realize what that plaque meant. Ellery listened quietly, accepting their words with the same gentleness he brought to everything else. Then Evan burst through the hall doors breathless, his backpack bouncing behind him. Mr. Brooks, he called, running straight to him. Without hesitation, the boy grabbed Ellery's hand with both of his own. I knew they were wrong. I knew it. Ellery squeezed his hand lightly. You did just fine tonight, son. I wish Dad could have seen it, Evan said, eyes bright. He'd say you deserve a whole wall of plaques. A soft laugh rippled through the small crowd. On the steps nearby, Linda Weaver stood half hidden behind a railing. Shoulders drawn tight. She clutched her clipboard to her chest like it could shield her from everything she'd just witnessed. When Ellery's gaze drifted toward her, she flinched and looked away. Her face still pale from the moment the general had saluted him. She took a hesitant step forward, then seemed to think better of it. Her mouth opened a little, but no words came. Instead, she simply lowered her head and disappeared down the walkway, choosing silence over a confession she wasn't ready to make. The remaining neighbors shifted aside as the general approached Ellery. In his hands, he held the wooden plaque cleaned off, as if someone had wiped the rain marks from its edges. We found this inside, he said. Figured it belonged with you. Ellery took it carefully, thumb brushing the carved lettering the way he had traced it under his porch light just nights before. We'd like to fix its frame, a neighbor said quietly. Make it sturdy again, so it can hang the way it was meant to. Yes, another agreed. We want to put it back, with the right meaning this time. Ellery looked around at them, faces he'd known in passing, faces that once judged him, faces now softened with something closer to respect. Perhaps even gratitude. The street seemed warmer somehow, despite the cold wind creeping in from the north. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, then faded. Porch lights flickered on across Maple Ridge as people returned home, talking quietly among themselves. Evan tugged Ellery's sleeve. Feels like the town's changing, he whispered. Ellery looked out over the street at neighbors holding their jackets tighter, clustering in small groups, speaking softer than usual. Something had shifted indeed, something long overdue. Still, the town had one more word to say. Veterans Day morning arrived with a quiet kind of pride in Maple Ridge. The sun broke through thin clouds in long, gentle rays, brushing the rooftops with a warm gold that felt almost ceremonial. People gathered in front of Town Hall in coats and scarves, their breaths rising in small white puffs, their conversations softer than usual. The brass plate covered by a navy cloth hung beneath the flagpole, waiting. Ellery Brooks stood near the front, cap in hand, dressed in the same steady calm he wore every day. Evan stayed close beside him, shifting from foot to foot, trying to look grown, but too excited to hide it. A small choir hummed warm notes near the steps, and the whole square seemed to settle into a respectful stillness. Mayor Dixon stepped forward, first cleared his throat, and nodded toward the covered plaque. We've gathered today, he said, to honor someone who never asked for recognition. Someone who served this town long before most of us knew how deeply. He reached up, took the edge of the cloth, and pulled it aside. The brass plate gleamed in the morning light. For the quiet man this town once overlooked, a murmur swept through the crowd, soft, reverent, carrying both apology and gratitude. Ellery blinked once, slowly, as if absorbing each letter. General Hale approached him, Then, moving with the same deliberate dignity he carried into the HOA hall days earlier. He stopped beside Ellery heels, close together, spine straight as a young soldier's. The crowd instinctively parted around him. "Hail," Ellery said under his breath, almost embarrassed. But the retired general lifted his chin, eyes steady. "Mr. Brooks," he said, voice carrying across the square the other day, "I stood at attention for you." People leaned in, listening. And today he continued, lowering his voice with a gentleness that spread across the crowd like warmth. "This whole town stands with you. It wasn't loud, and it didn't need to be." One by one, people around them straightened their shoulders. A few men removed their hats. Some placed hands over their hearts. Even Evan stood a little taller, imitating the general's posture with wide-eyed seriousness. Brooks swallowed softly, his gaze fixed on the plate. "I never expected anything like this," he murmured. "That's why you deserve it," Hale replied. Evan tugged at Ellery's sleeve, offering a carefully folded letter. "This came for you today," the boy said. "From Dad. He said he hopes I grow up to be like you." Ellery took the letter gently, as though it were made of something fragile and precious. "That's a mighty big compliment," he said. "It's true," Evan whispered. "I want to be like you too." The choir resumed a soft tune, something close to a hymn, but lighter, more like a warm breeze than a song. Families drifted toward Ellery, offering quiet words, handshakes, and nods that meant far more than speeches ever could. Later that afternoon, when the crowds had gone and the last of the morning's warmth had faded into a calm November hush, Ellery sat on his porch swing. The wood creaked under him in a familiar way. He held the service coin between his fingers, turning it slowly so the fading light caught each worn edge. For the first time in a long while, he let himself smile small content, the kind that settles deep in a person's chest and doesn't ask for attention. He leaned back, listening to the soft sway of the swing, the distant hum of town life, the comfort of a day that had finally spoken on his behalf. If this story moved you, share it forward.